Oh, Dr. Kimishima, sorry for the wait. The analysis of the burnt material has come back from the laboratory. Calcium hydroxide was detected in the sample.
Calcium hydroxide? You mean slaked lime?
Yes, small amounts of quicklime were also detected. Quicklime is a substance that releases a great deal of heat when it reacts with water.
Huh, I see. So this was...
I agree, but isn't it odd? If the killer wanted to start a fire, there are far easier ways to go about it.
You're right. It's our job to investigate that, isn't it? Yes, these two pieces can be combined into one. The rope wrapped around the ceiling fan is what caused it to break. The question now is why there was a rope around it in the first place. The fire began near the fallen table. Calcium hydroxide was found in the substance on the floor there. Calcium hydroxide is formed through the reaction of quicklime and water. That reaction creates something else as well. Yes. Quicklime releases 65 kilojoules of energy per mole when it reacts with water. This was the method used to start the fire in this room. First, you would also put quicklime around the floor and on the table near the glass. When the table falls over, the hydration heat caused by the reaction would cause a fire. But why would the killer go through such a complicated plan to start a fire? That's right. If all he wanted was a fire, he could have just set something on fire. The killer needed to have a delay until the fire began. That's why he devised a plan that made use of two components. Yes, this trick relied on the ceiling fan and a rope. The killer wrapped one end of the rope around the fan and tied the other to a table leg. When the fan activated according to its timer, the fan wound the rope up, flipping the table over and spilling the water onto the quicklime. However, there's still one basic question left to be asked. Why did the killer have to set the room on fire in the first place? Why go through this extravagant setup to make it happen? The reason for that is... Exactly. Due to the fact that there was nothing flammable added to the body itself, the culprit never intended for the corpse and the evidence to be destroyed in the fire. Instead, the killer wanted to cause a commotion that would draw attention to the corpse. Now then, why would that be? That's right. By delaying the start of the fire, the plan was to have enough time to create a viable alibi for when the fire began. It's easy. I mean, with this method of misdirection, the culprit could start a fire hours after having left the crime scene entirely. This is the entire truth behind this mysterious arson. There's a reaction to blood on this screw that's securing the doorknob. The screw seems rather loose as well. Come to think of it, the door to this room was chained shut when the fire started. Could this be related to that in some way?
Dr. Kimishima, we've identified the blood on the screw. It's a DNA match with the victim, Dennis Taylor. Why would his blood be there, of all places?
It's simple. What happened was... That's right. It's probably because he touched the murder weapon.
Wait, why would the killer touch that screw with the murder weapon?
He would have to, if the weapon was... Yes, a screwdriver. It was likely used to both loosen and tighten that screw.
I see. Then the screwdriver left the blood on the screw while he was covering his tracks.
Yes. These pieces of information are hiding an important fact. I didn't notice because the bleeding had stopped completely, but this isn't a bruise. It's a stab wound. This strange pattern here is likely... Yes, that's right. It's indisputable evidence that the weapon was jammed in so deeply that the grip left a bruise. Yes. These do lead the way to a definite truth. Looking at the location of the bruise, the tip of the screwdriver must have pierced Dennis's lung. His lung would then rupture, causing pulmonary emphysema, and he would have suffocated. This explains the spots of hemorrhaging in the corpse's eyes. What actually happened that day is slowly coming to light now. Yes. These two can tell us how the murder happened. On the day of the incident, the killer came to the victim's room and stabbed him in the torso. The murder weapon was... Yes. The screwdriver pierced the victim's lung, causing pulmonary emphysema. This caused respiratory problems due to lung failure. Thus, the cause of death was... After this, the killer moved the victim to the bed. This is most likely because... Indeed. The murderer then arranged the corpse to make the death appear to be a suicide. That is what I believe took place, according to the evidence we have gathered. This is odd. There's something missing that should be here. If the puncture wound in the abdomen is the true cause of death... How could I do that? Right. There should be blood stains and a hole where the screwdriver went through his clothing.
What's this? It just looks like a loose screw to me.
Think harder, little guy. How was the room when the firefighters arrived at the scene? The entrance was closed, but was it completely inaccessible? That's right. The chain on the door had been attached, but the door itself wasn't locked.
Sorry, but the door only opens about 15 centimeters with the chain attached. I don't even think a small child could get through a space that small.
You're so unimaginative. Flex your mind and think about it. Listen to me. What I'm trying to tell you is... This loose screw tells us everything. With the screw removed, the entire plate on the door can be swiveled around by the doorknob. The plate itself is about 20 centimeters long, so the gap increases to almost 35 centimeters. How big does somebody have to be that he couldn't fit through a space that size?
Oh, I see now. That that's more than enough room to get past the door. So the killer just screwed the plate back on from the outside after he left the room then.
I think that's the most likely explanation, but the killer was in plain sight once he was outside the door. He wanted to finish quickly. The killer couldn't completely tighten the screw and left the area as we found it.
Well, that proves that this isn't quite the locked room mystery we thought it was.
Huh. Still, this doesn't help us figure out who the killer is. I need to investigate the situation in more detail. Yes, these pieces of information can tell us something. According to Mr. Taylor's friend, on the day of the incident, Dennis had been wearing... That's right. He was supposedly wearing a red Portland Jacks t-shirt that day. But when his body was discovered, it was wearing... Yes, his corpse was found wearing a white shirt. In other words, his clothing had changed. And yet, if that was all we know, we couldn't rule out if the deceased had changed his shirt himself. However, if he had, there would still be a discrepancy. Yes, the corpse had a wound that wasn't reflected by the state of the clothing it was wearing. There's only one answer to this puzzle, and that is... Indeed. Whoever had killed Mr. Taylor replaced the shirt he was wearing after killing him. The reason for doing that was... Exactly. It was probably to hide the stab wound and make us believe the cut wrist was the cause of death. The killer staged the suicide in order to mislead us. I see. These two are related. There are no vital reactions to the broken finger. That means the damage occurred after death. Considering that the killer must have changed the victim's clothing after death, that's right. The killer broke the corpse's finger while changing the shirt on the body.
Dr. Kimishima, how's the investigation going?
I've almost uncovered the deception, but the truth hasn't completely been revealed.
I see. So we can't arrest the culprit yet?
That's right. I need conclusive evidence that can help us identify the killer.
The most reliable giveaway would be if we could find a fingerprint at the crime scene. However, only the victim's fingerprints were found when HQ searched the room.
I'm not surprised, considering the lengths the killer's gone to hide his tracks. The murderer was probably wearing gloves while the crime was being committed.
Isn't there anything the killer might have touched?
Something that would require him to take his gloves off? It's hard to think of anything.
Well, the best evidence would be on a hard, slick, inorganic substance. It doesn't matter what size it is.
All we can investigate are the crime scene, the corpse, and what the corpse was wearing. Could there be anything among those items that the killer touched with a bare hand? I'll have to investigate further. Thank you, little guy. The killer put this shirt on the victim's corpse after the murder took place. That would mean that the killer would have had to button the shirt up as well. Buttoning up a shirt with gloves on is no easy task. If my predictions are correct...
The buttons on the victim's clothes, huh? I'll look into them right away. One moment, please.
Hopefully this will help us find the identity of our mystery murderer.
Dr. Kimishima, it was there. I found it. There's a fingerprint from someone who isn't the victim. It's, a right thumb.
Great. Run the print through the list of registered offenders immediately.
Leave it to me. Such an attention to detail has gone into this. It can't possibly be a first-time offender. There has to be a match for this fingerprint in our records.
I sincerely hope so. This case should be over soon. The dead shall speak. Let's put together the truth of what happened here. The victim in this case is 30-year-old Dennis Taylor. As there's no motive for murder, it's a suspected suicide. However, the victim had a hidden other side. This card is the one with proof of that. Yes, while he did work at the bar, he also dealt drugs. This case is related to the victim's drug activities. The proof of that is on this card. Indeed, the drugs hidden behind the shelf were missing. The killer went into Taylor's room to kill him for his drugs. The real cause of the victim's death can tell us that. I know that because of this card. Right. The wound on the wrist was not the true cause. Next, the killer disguised the murder as a suicide. This card proves the misdirection used to hide the murder. Yes, the appearance of suicide covered up the real cause. The next topic is the secret hidden in the room itself. The murderer used a trick to create a locked room mystery. It was made to seem as if the victim was the only one there. This card shows the trick that had been used. Exactly. The killer thought this would clear his trail. And yet, the culprit had one more way to hide from suspicion. That was to hide when the murder itself took place. This card shows how he went about that ruse. The murder took place 3 hours prior to the fire's start. It's natural to assume that if the room was locked, then the crime and the fire would be at the same time. The plan was perfect. No fingerprints were left in the room. However, there was one thing the killer hadn't counted on. There was one task he needed to remove his gloves to do. This card is evidence of that task. He probably couldn't button the clothes with his gloves on. No matter how small the buttons, there were still prints. Even a fragment of a fingerprint can be used to identify him. The victim must have been surprised. After all, he thought the killer was a customer. This is what he said at the very end.
Stop! No!
The final flickers of this soul's light show me the truth. Who's there?
I'm sorry. I must have surprised you.
You're that electrician. Why are you here?
Oh, I was called up because a switchboard blew. I need to have it fixed by tomorrow.
I see. That sounds difficult. Freeze. Don't move. I see corpses all day. One more won't bother me.
Naomi! Are you hurt? I'm sorry. I should have stayed.
I've solved the case. I'll give you my report tomorrow.
The report can wait. Naomi, you must think of your safety.
Nobody lives forever. Even if I died today, it'd just be earlier than I expected.